Okay, so let me start. Which one of you has a smart home? Like, ooh, pretty substantial amount of people. And which one of you has at least one smart home device in their home? Oh, nice. You see, because I think that everyone in their home have at least one smart home device. Because, for example, your mobile phone may be considered as a sensor for your smart home. Maybe your laptop or your smart-enabled TV, or maybe your robotic vacuum cleaner. The problem is that those devices are not talking to each other. They are speaking different languages, different protocols, different APIs. So for me, a smart home system is like a fancy translator. It's like a translator that can understand many languages, protocols, and APIs with some monitoring capabilities and with some controlling capabilities. My name is Szymon Bałdyga, and as my professional background, I used to be an automation tester. And you know what they say about automation testers. They are like testers, but the lazy ones. So, and a few years back, I decided that I want to move on with my life, acquire my own place. I knew that I'm gonna use let's automate everything approach. And today I would like to share with you this amazing journey, how I failed to do so. And I think that after watching this presentation, you will be able to acquire this highly required wife-approved badge for this project. Okay, so what are the categories? What we are talking about? What are the categories of smart home? Well, I see smart home industry divided into three categories. The first one is a commercial one. You need a professional installer in order to come into your house and install some devices. But you don't have much control over automations, over what is happening. You simply order the system, it gets installed, and we are done. So it is fairly limited for our purposes. The secondary approach is to use widely available products that we can buy in store, but from one company, but from one manufacturer, and automate them within the one ecosystem. So for example, your robotic vacuum cleaner, your lighting system, some additional sensors, bought from one company, put into your mobile app. There are some basic automation capabilities. But there are still some limitations because, there is no company in the world that does everything, right? So probably you will be limited by the amount of devices that this company is producing. And, if this company goes out of business, you are probably left without support. And the last category of devices of smart home is when you are buying the products, but you are cherry picking the best products, or maybe the cheapest, from different companies, and you are integrating them into one ecosystem, into one system, this translator system. So how it started for me? Well, a few years back, I bought two devices, two different lighting systems from different companies, from Philips Hue and from Xiaomi. And I was looking for a way to integrate them, to force them to talk to each other, because I wanted to group them and, for example, with one simple switch, turn both of them at the same time. But they were from different companies and even different protocols, because Philips Hue is using Zigbee and Xiaomi is Wi-Fi based. So after hours of searching, I found this page. Which one of you knows this page? Okay. So when I first opened this page, I couldn't understand what Home Assistant is. I was looking because there is some picture of a mobile phone. Is it a mobile app? Like, is it a server application? Is it some physical device that you can buy? And after all, Home Assistant is a server. So you can install it on any device like a Raspberry Pi or Intel NUC in your home. And why it's awesome? When I read through all of those possibilities and capabilities, I was in standard, because this was exactly what I was looking for. Like, Home Assistant have so many different integrations and official integrations that I was a standard. So the more I read through the page, I was in standard. Right. And Home Assistant has a pretty sweet suite of officially supported integrations. And what is integration? Integration is a category of devices from one manufacturer that is being supported. So for example, let's take Philips Hue. Under this one category, we've got 50 devices that are supported, because Philips Hue is producing currently around 50 devices. We've got, for example, IKEA Tradfree. IKEA is coming into the smart home industry, and we've got first sensors from them, motorized blinds, and it's also officially supported. And there are more than 2,000 categories, and those are only official ones. And Home Assistant is open source, so you can create your own. Pretty sweet. Okay, so we've got our first devices from different companies, and we have our home assistance instance, right? So now, how to create an automation, how to force one device to trigger another one. And nowadays, Home Assistant has a pretty sweet mechanism, which looks something like that for creating automations that, there is a if this, then that kind of syntax. So if something occurs, then you can trigger some automation. But I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know this mechanism very well because I'm not using it. Why? Because it wasn't always like that. Because in the past, you had to write automation in YAML files. And YAML files are, if you know the syntax of YAML, it's intention based. So it's pretty complex to understand. If the conditions got bigger and there are multiple, nested conditions, it's becoming harder and harder to read. So I was looking for something better. And thanks to that, Home Assistant has this pretty sweet addition mechanism called add-ons. And one of the add-ons, probably the most commonly used, is a node-RED. A node-RED is a web-based UI. It looks something like that it allows you to create automation in a graphical form. Pretty easy to understand. And I had a demo for you for today, but this bad boy failed on me, so I'm not going to do like live demo with real devices, but I'm going to show you on my smart home, like a backup plan. Okay, so now we've got a node-RED. This is my production instance running currently in my home. So if I'm going to break something here, the smart home won't let me in after I go back from eXpo. So let's be careful because, yeah. And I don't have physical keys. So. And as you can see, those tabs above are called workflows, or flows. And this palette on the left are called nodes. And there are different categories of nodes. So let's, for example, I can only show you two of them. The first one is inject node. And the secondary is debug node. And nodes have outputs and inputs, and you are reading them in the reading order, so from the left to right. So this timestamp in this inject timestamp node has this gray square, which is the output hook, and this debug has input. So we can connect them, right? And now, across the flows, there is an information that is being sent from one node to another, called payload, because maybe we want to transfer some information and use it in further automation. So what inject does, it injects current timestamp into this payload. And what debug does is printing this payload to our debug window. So if now I'm going to press inject, I get, in our debug window, I get timestamp. But I know where is the smart home in this. Okay, so let's do something more smart home related. So there are also nodes related to the Home Assistant itself. Like, for example, call service node. And call service is a feature that you are going to use when you want to trigger some action on device. So first, we have to select the domain that we want to control. So let's control light. Service, what we want to do. So for example, turn on. And now entity. And yeah, let's for example, turn on the bathroom light. So why not? Entity bathroom. And now, if good gods of demo effect will have mercy on me, as you can see, it's currently off. I'm not touching anything. It has been off. It has been turned on. Like currently, someone probably can take a pee. Yeah, great. Okay, and if we hit this the second time, well, nothing happens because we, program only to turn it on. So there is a better way. We can use service called toggle, which does this logic of turning off and on again for us automatically. And it's off again. But there is a better way of doing things because you don't know what was executed here. It was either turn on or turn off. So we can do something like current state node, which is like an if statement for the automation. So now, within the current state node, we can define the entity that we want to test. So for example, this bathroom light. And if the state is on, and now this node has the two outputs. The upper one is if the condition is true, and the lower one is if the condition is false. So let's copy this one because again, I'm lazy. So now we want to turn it off because the upper is for positive condition. And we want to turn it off if the condition was false. We need to delete this one. Yeah, of course. Why not? Now, let's give us 5 seconds for prayers, no matter the religion. On and off. And why is it better? Because it gives us the better control over our automation, so we can attach multiple actions. For example, if the lights gets turned on, we can get a notification via voice commands or on our mobile phone. Nice. So with this one, I showed you the sample flow, and this is your homework. No, seriously, this is the automation that gets executed once I arrive home. Okay, so now we have some home assistant, we have some devices, we have a possibility to automate them. Now let's talk about controlling those devices like from physical world, because I showed you in the UI. So my ultimate goal was to create a smartphone that is transparent to the user. I could put a fancy tablets on the wall next to each door and so on, but after all, I wanted to be simple, and so that my grandma could operate it. So after all, my ultimate goal was to make it transparent to the user. Like, you are going to my home, you're probably not going to realize that some wizardry is going on. And with the switches, there is a major problem, because the switches have states. They are off and they are on. So how to trigger an automation, a program with this one? And there is a better way of controlling smart home, and it is like 21st century advancement, because there is something called momentary switch, and it is the same switch, but with a spring. So it goes back to its original position. So it behaves like a button, and it's a better way of controlling things. So now we have a physical way of controlling things. Let's create our first automation. Okay, so there was this button on the wall, and the purpose of this button was supposed to be, I want to have some additional lighting within this room when it gets depressed. And we can do this by 2 actions, by turning on the lights or by opening the curtain, the motorized curtain. And this is the basic automation for that. So we are checking if the sun is above horizon, so is it bright? And if it is bright, maybe the curtain is closed. If it is closed, so simply open it, and we will have additional lighting. But if the curtain is open, turn on the light, but close the curtain, because it's dark outside probably, and let's have some privacy because we are turning on the light, I'm living on the ground floor, let's close the curtain. And it worked okay for a couple of weeks, and then the dark days have come. And I do not mean like I had some mental issues, but literal dark days outside. There were clouds. So I put an additional sensor that was checking if it's bright outside. It was checking the illumination level outside my home. So, the automation got slightly bigger, because with the sun was above, we wanted to check additional condition. So it got bigger and bigger. And, I was stupid enough to put this illumination sensor next to the lighting fixture outside my house. And sometimes the sensor got blinded by this light. So I created another iteration. And I even created a simple fixing mechanism for this sensor, because if the sensor was blinded by this outside light, I was turning off this outside light. I was waiting 2 seconds. I was then checking the sensor. Then I was waiting 2 another seconds, and I was turning back on this light. Please remember, the original issue was that I want to have some additional lighting. The button gets pressed, and currently, the disco party is going on outside my home. So it was stupid. Like, I was trying so hard to make it work that I failed, because I was trying to make it too smart. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is our sin number 1. And why this is a sin? Because we are trying to do something impossible. Because we are trying to predict human behaviors and intentions. And we are basing on really defined data. Like, the algorithm is there and it's deterministic, but the data is not apparent. So if we are sleeping and waking up in the middle of the night, and the curtain is closed, you don't know what time it is, what is going to happen when I click this button? Like, I don't know. I want to have additional lighting, but like my subconsciousness wants to know what will happen if the lights go on or maybe the curtain gets opened. And with this approach, you cannot do this. Great. And those switches are great, those momentary switches. And everyone knows what the switches does, right? When there is one next to the bathroom door, like in this case, you know what it does. It turns on the light. But what if there are 4 of those? What if there are 6 of them and they are mounted on the strange location, like on the armrest of your sofa? What if there are 7 of these bad boys? Like seriously, let's play a game. What do you think this one does? And 2 hints, this one is in my bedroom, and this is the door frame, so it's next to the door. What do you think the left one does? No, Adam, don't say that. The first one on the left, so the closest to the door frame, turns on the lights. The second is for summoning the robotic vacuum cleaner. So when you press it, you summon the robotic vacuum cleaner to this room, it gets cleaned, and it is sent back to the charging station. The third is for turning on something called night mode. It turns off all of the lights in the home. And the fourth one is for controlling the curtain within this room. And let me take a short break for this one. Because I probably wasn't supposed to tell you that, but I'm an adult human being, right? And there was this one time that I was pouring some water into the bathtub, got naked, and decided to do, I'm gonna pour myself a nice pint of water. So I came to the kitchen, which is of course the living room, like it is nowadays, these days. And I was pouring this water, and my girlfriend decided that she knows that there is a possibility to use this switch to dim the lights in the bedroom. And she pressed the second switch. And you remember that second switch was not for the curtain, it was for the robotic vacuum cleaner, right? Yeah. But I have those big windows in my house that go all the way to the floor. So I was smart enough that, I created a secondary automation that if the robotic vacuum gets turned on, it also opened all of the shades in my home. All of the shades. And I'm living on the ground floor. And it was in the middle of the night. So from outside the world, it might look something like that. No, I'm not going to show you me naked. Yeah, since then I call this unexpected nudity reveal episode. Like, I wanted neighbors to know me better, but like not that close. It went too far. Okay, but what was the original issue? Like seriously, what went wrong here? What was the original issue? Yeah, I know my girlfriend, right? But we cannot change her. Actually, we could. But, I still kind of like her, so let's not do this. Yeah, because I think that the step number 2 is that the switches are switches and should remain switches. So its primary role should be to control the lights. Because, with those pushy things, there are some hidden wizardry behind those switches. Because, you can press them once, but you can also press them twice or 3 times. You can hold them and you can release them. So there is 5 different actions that you can program. So maybe we should hide those awesome, summoning robotic vacuum cleaner features to some additional actions, not the primary ones. The secondary option to solve this issue would be to label the bloody thing. Like if there are 7 of them, and even the manufacturer of these switches have custom buttons that you can bought with engravings on them. You can also maybe use tablets for those complicated things. Maybe we should not go with the physical switches. Maybe we should use some touchscreen stuff. And after all, if you are being professionally lazy like me, you can do nothing. But if you are going to do nothing, at least educate the users. Because if you are going to my house, the first thing that I'm gonna say, hello, this is the switches. The next one to the door frame turns on the light, do not touch the others. And there are ladies and things. So at least educate the user. But there is a secondary thing to this problem. Because the unexpected nudity reveal episode was caused due to automation being triggered by another automation. And I do not have resolution for this one because sometimes you want it to behave that way. But please use it wisely. And in some cases, you may need to implement disable automation mechanism, like for those rare exceptional situations. For example, summoning a robotic vacuum cleaner to the bathroom, which doesn't have any any windows, so we do not need to open all of the curtains. And it may cause damage, like a physical damage. How? Why? Let's imagine that behind this curtain there is a window that can be opened. What happens then? It may get caught. The tracks might get ripped, the materials can get ripped. A lot of bad stuff happens. And remember those 6 switches on armrest of my sofa? It is designed to control automatic reclining feature of this sofa. And this sofa has a pretty sophisticated mechanism. It has to handle some substantial weight, right? So what if child would put a finger inside this mechanism, scissor-like mechanism? The bad stuff can happen. Ouchie. So the sin number 4, and probably the most dangerous one, is to taking proper care of automating mechanical items. And with this one, I have a list of things that should be considered when automating mechanical items. The first of all, please use products that have some native safety mechanism. Like, for example, an automated garage door, which, each one of those devices, modern devices, has this pretty nice clutch mechanism that if you are going to stop the movement, it's going to detect the situation and, recline the gate a little bit. Or, for example, the standard gate with those infrared sensors that if you are going to break the barrier, it's going to stop and do not destroy your car. Those safety mechanisms are the best, and you can solely rely on them. If you cannot do this, please use manual overrides. So, possibility to physically disable, for example, the motor, or even, pull out the plug from the walls, expose the socket. And if you cannot provide those two, please at least wear for this one. Because we could, for example, install additional Windows sensor on this window and prevent this opening curtain automation to being executed when the window is open, right? So with a simple addition of chip switch, chip sensor, we can work around this. And if you cannot guarantee any of those 3, please reconsider if you want to automate it at all. Seriously, because there will be consequences. And 3 weeks ago, it happened, my shade got caught with the handle of the window and, this stiffening stick got broken and the gears went crazy. So there was a lot of problems. Okay, now I have a secondary story with my girlfriend. I don't know why bad stuff happens. She's always next to me. Okay, so we are talking about using these buttons on walls. So if there is this automation that if I am leaving home, I'm pressing the button. I want the home, to be ready to turn off all of the things and so on. And this is like a part of this automation. So it turns off all of the lights and it sends the signals to all the shades, curtains, and so on to close them. And we have something called wait until node. And this node awaits until something happens. So in this case, it awaits until all of the shades report that it has been closed. And after it happens, it will arm the alarm. So it waits until all of the shades are closed, because we don't want to arm the alarm before, because, the moving parts can trigger the alarm. So we want to arm the alarm afterwards. But, it worked in 90% of the cases until one day I forgot the keys. And, the signal to close all of the shades was already executed, and sometimes it takes 2 minutes for all of the shades to be closed. I went back, I override the closing mechanism with switch, the curtain gets opened, and I left the house. And I thought that everything is okay. Until I went back home, I sat in my automatically reclined sofa, pour some wine, turn on the TV, press the button on the armrest to close the curtain. The curtain gets closed, and I'm hearing only 3 things: short beep, and long beep, which means that the alarm has been armed. And I'm freezing, in the middle of the movement, going freeze. Do not even move. Why? Because the alarm has been armed. And what are we going to do? I'm going to use my famous ninja mode in order to disarm this alarm. And of course, I'm clumsy, so I do not have a ninja mode. And of course, the alarm gets triggers. And because of the scene number 3, which is automation triggering automation, all of the bad stuff happens because the lights get turned on, the curtain gets open, the security team is going to visit me, the, loud as hell siren goes off, the outside lights going like mentally red, and it was midnight, so my neighbors were very pleased once more. Yeah. And because I have a very colorful imagination, but I also do not remember passwords, so I don't remember the safety word that I'm supposed to give to the security crew. And I have a colorful imagination, so I'm imagining that they are putting me on the ground, putting the handcuffs on, sending me to some Siberian jail when I'm going to die alone with some rapists, murderers, and other criminals who forgot to put the freaking timeout inside their automations. Because there is pretty sweet timeout mechanism within this wait until node that if, for example, within 3 minutes, those curtains won't get closed, we are, switching to this lower part of this node, and we can, for example, attach a notification to my phone, which probably would be something wise to do, that, hey, Szymon, something went wrong. The alarm has not been out. So the scene number 5 is please take care of 100% of the cases. Like 90% of cases is not sufficient, probably. Automations should have timeouts and handle those exceptional situations with either graceful handling or with notification. I don't know what do you think, but for me, it looks like a good design pattern for some application. Like graceful handling, notification, timeouts. Yeah, because the automation is a simple program after all, so it should obey the same rules. Okay, so now I'd like to switch topic for a little bit about temperature. What do you think about this graph? It reveals that temperatures in each room throughout the year in my house. And I can see 2 areas, this one and this middle one. What do you think has happened here? Why those temperatures are that different? No ideas? So let me put this on slightly larger graph with outside temperature. This middle one is a heating season. The temperature fluctuates over the year, but in the heating season, it gets stabilized. Probably you are thinking that I have some fancy thermostatic mechanism that controls this temperature or something. Well, no. I established, this Grafana monitoring like 2 years ago, and I put on my personal backlog home automation stuff the item that one day I want to have possibility to control temperature in each room. But after 2 years, I reviewed this graph and I understood one thing, that I do not need it. Because it works so perfectly well, like, the thermostatic system built within the heating system itself is working so greatly, like the temperatures are pretty stable throughout the heating season, that I do not need to do this. And this graph shows 2 funny things. The first one is this one, which is like middle of the December of 2021, which was the cleaning for the Jesus Windows episode, when you open the windows. And the secondary, which was outage of the heating system. Nice. And there is a secondary, very interesting topic in the smart home, which is presence detection. Very hot topic if you are going to put this topic of, hey, how I want to detect if I'm home, how can I do this in Home Assistant? The problem is that, the relying solely on GPS, on the GPS location of your phone, is not that great. Because depending on the operating system, so for example, in Android, due to battery saving policies, the location gets not reported that often. You have to rely on multiple things. Like, for example, if motion sensor detects the movement inside the house, if the lights are on. So the most commonly answered question, the most commonly provided answer to this question on forums of Home Assistant is something called Bayesian theory of probability, which is like combining multiple sensors with its probability figure in order to establish if you are home or not. So we are using multiple parameters in order to establish the level of probability that you are home. And one day, again, my girlfriend said to me that, like putting out the phone in order to click one button to, disarm the home and open the gate is too much. She wants to have something better. And after, reviewing all of the possibilities, like detecting automatically location and so on, what I did, I bought a $10 switch that I installed on the dashboard of her car. And that was it. After, like days of research on Bayesian theory of probability. So the scene number 6 is about automating something that maybe not necessarily has to be automated or does not need automation. Because if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? There is also a probability that we are going to commit sin number 1, overcomplication. And also maybe it can be resolved with a simple addition like $10 switch and save yourself years of research. Okay, and we are going back to the last scene. And this is the scene that, is probably the worst of them all, because it's creating the smart home based on uncertain data. So let's take, for example, the garage gate. Standard garage gate has a remote with one switch. So once it gets pressed, it opens the gate. Once it gets closed, once it gets pressed, it stops. And then if you're going to click it once more and going to close the gate. But it has no feedback mechanism. Like, I don't know if the gate has been closed, right? And if I'm like randomly clicking the button, I don't know what is currently happening. So in order to have to be certain that the gate has been closed, I put this window sensor, this window opening sensor, onto the mechanism of the garage door and created pretty sophisticated automation for this to handle this situation. And it would work perfectly fine. There is like virtual state that, depending on the previous state and the number of clicks, like there is this delays and clicks, it can figure out what the gate is currently doing. What you cannot see is the part missing there, because there was a part that if it's set to closing, after 20 seconds, it was checking if the gate has been closed. And if it has been not, it was going back to the beginning and it was starting to clicking. And it worked perfectly fine, because if someone interrupted the movement, something went wrong, gate did not get closed, it get repeated and eventually it closed itself. Until one day, the neighbor called me and said, Szymon, something bad is happening with your gate. And I'm looking at the dashboard and no, it's still open. And I'm like, I'm not home, it's open, it's weird. And I'm reviewing the camera feed footage and it gets closed and open. Oh, it opened and closed, opened and closed, opened and closed. Because this bad boy failed me. It was working okay for 6 months, and then it stopped working, stopped reporting its time. So this scene is pretty obvious, but if you are building the smart home and using sensors and switches like that, please use it wisely and do not rely on them solely. And then you have it, 7 ugly scenes of every smart home. I can give you 2 more pieces of advice. Evaluate your automation yearly. Like, check if everything worked okay, if it needs some adjustment. You can even create a notes when something went wrong or bad, wrong or simply okay. Because after all, if automation will surprise you, but like in a good way, like for example, after 2 years, this automation that gets triggered when the alarm, goes off, it was the first time that I showed that I was able to see it, like in real life, after 2 years. It surprised me. It was maybe unnecessary in that particular case, but after all, it worked okay, and it was pretty. I was pretty surprised and pretty glad that it did. And there is probably one more thing, because the ASIN, and probably the greatest of them all, is not trying to have a smart home at all. And thank you.